began a new section in the book of Revelation 2 studies back. If you remember, we divided the book of Revelation in half. What is half of 22? 11, and 11 chapters took us through 7 churches, 7 seals, and 7 trumpets. And in each one, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th month was the special month we were heading towards because Christ is going to get married in the 7th month to the bride. And when we started chapter 12, the second half of the book, the first thing we saw was the bride. When you go to a marriage, you want to see the bride. And so John gave us a picture of the bride in the first 2 verses of chapter 12, a woman, and then he showed her opposer, the dragon. And so last 2 times we've talked about the dragon, and I thought of this morning the way that we can remember the dragon is we can say the pagan dragon. Does that stick? The pagan dragon, because the dragon is that old serpent, the devil, but especially he's manifested in Revelation chapter 12 as that pagan persecution of Christianity of the early church. So we have the pagan dragon. And he's going to be talked about right here, so we'll put pagan dragon. Pagan dragon. And we're going to hear a little bit more about him in these verses, but we're especially interested today in a beast like a leopard. A beast like a leopard. And so we can read in chapter 13 of Revelation, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So we want to look first at the description of this beast, then we'll look at his activity, and then we'll look at his future. And his description we want to consider first, where did he come from? Remember, in chapter 12, the dragon appeared in heaven, right? And then he was cast down to the earth. But here we're starting on earth with the sea of humanity, and we see here, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. So this one we see coming up out of the masses of humanity, out of the sea. That's the location. And what about his appearance? It says he had 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, if you remember, the dragon had 7 heads and 10 horns. So this is sort of like the son of the dragon, you might say, because he's got similar characteristics. But the dragon's heads were crowned. And what does it say here about the beast? 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. So when it says blasphemy, you think about saying something against God. And that gives us an idea that this power has a religious aspect. He is a religion approach to the whole scene. The pagan dragon, he was sort of pagan religion, but now we're coming closer to true religion, and we find that he has on his heads the names of blasphemy, but on his horns he has crowns. So that makes us think especially of the 10 horns that were in the book of Daniel. Remember, 10 horns came up out of that fourth empire, and then a little horn took away 3 of them. So the beast comes up out of the sea, and he has 7 heads. That takes us throughout the prophetic history, because the heads began in Daniel. It says Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome were the empires, and that's what a head represents. A head represents a government, a mountain, a government, and that's then what the heads refer to. But the crowns especially refer to those 10 toes of the image of Daniel, or the 10 horns in Daniel 7. And it says, upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. So when it says like a leopard, and we're in a book of prophecy, we're in an apocalyptic book, and that means that we're supposed to think about the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. And in the book of Daniel, there's a beast like a leopard. And the beast like a leopard is fast, and he persecutes God's people. And we can read in Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 13. The prophet Zechariah writes in Zechariah 9:13, when I have bent Judah for me, filled the bow with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion. So that's God's people, Ephraim and Judah, and God's going to use his people like a bow in a battle. Then it says, I'm going to raise up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece. Well, that was what the leopard represented in Daniel, was the Grecian Empire. So it's an opposer to God's people. It's fast, and it opposes God's people. So when we say its appearance is like a leopard, you're supposed to think of some power, some world power that's fast in opposing God's people. And what else do we learn about his appearance? It says he had bare feet, right? But not B-A-R-E, B-E-A-R, bare feet. So that's another phrase you can remember. The pagan dragon is the progenitor of this beast, and this beast has bare feet. And the bear in Daniel represents Medo-Persia. And if you think about the Medo-Persian Empire, what particular story do you think about when you think about the Medo-Persian Empire? Daniel in the lion's den. When King Darius didn't want to put him there, but he'd been tricked into making a law that had to do with what? With prayer. And prayer for God's people is especially about the confession of sins. So this power, this beast power, has bare feet. It has feet like a bear, like Medo-Persia, that says you confess your sins to a human being and not to God. Just like Darius was forced to make a decree, you can't pray to any God except to me. And what else does he have? It says, feet. Let's see. His feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. What does the lion represent in Daniel? Babylon, right? That first beast. And what do you think about when you think about a story of Babylon? The great image of pure gold that was built on the plains of Dura, and Babylon made a decree, didn't they? A decree regarding worship. That you must come and bow down to this image of gold. And so this beast, he's fast He's worldwide because it says about Greece that Greece covered the whole world. In Daniel 2, chapter 2, verse 39, it tells us that about Greece. So it's worldwide, and Zechariah says it's against God's people, and the leopard was a swift animal, so it's fast against God's people in the whole world. And it has feet like a bear, meaning that it asks for forgiveness of a human being. And a mouth like a lion. Well, we could get a term to remember that. Let's see. We had Pagan Dragon, and then we had bare feet. Oh, B-E-A-R, bare feet. And how about lion lips? Can you remember those? Lion lips. And what did Babylon do? Babylon made decrees in regard to worship. It decreed, it legislated false worship. So those are the characteristics of this animal that comes up out of the sea that we're seeing in chapter 13. And we considered where it came from and its appearance and its likeness. Its appearance was 7 heads and 10 horns, but the horns were crowned. Its likeness like Babylon, Medo Persia, and Greece. And then it says, and the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. Well, we know who the dragon is. It's that pagan dragon, pagan Rome that persecuted. But now pagan Rome is giving its seat. What was the seat of Rome? It was Rome. It gave him his seat and his power. What was the power behind the throne? It was satanic, wasn't it? It was Satan himself that was cast out of heaven. And so it's a satanic power based in Rome and great authority. Well, Rome was a worldwide empire, so we expect this to be a worldwide power. So we've seen the location, the appearance, the likeness, and its progenitor, the pagan dragon, and we're now going to look at his activity in verses 3 through 7. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So the last few phrases there in verse 7, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. Well, we already saw that the Greece, like leopard, makes war against God's people. And it says, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. So there again it repeats the idea of worldwide. So we're right on base with our description of the leopard, the bear, and the lion. And it says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded. So the wounding of the heads, we're supposed to remember that heads represent these world empires, the heads of Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. And one of the heads, it says, of this beast was wounded. So one of the powers, and when we get to chapter 17, we'll see all 7 powers that prophecy talks about. It goes Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome, and then it has another one, and another one, and another one to make 7, and then it has an 8th one that's one of the 7, But we'll get there when we get to chapter 17. But for here, it says it had a head that was wounded to death, but the deadly wound was healed, and the world wondered after the beast. Now, why are we talking about this beast? Because we're giving a prologue at the marriage. Remember, we're now in the most holy place. We entered there at the last verse of chapter 11, in heaven's most holy place, where the marriage is to take place, and these are the people that are coming to the marriage in heaven. The bride, dressed in white, the pagan dragon, and now the beast that looks like a leopard. And so we get a little prologue, a little story of who he is. When you go to a wedding, you'd like to know who's getting married. And so it told us a little bit about the bride. It told us a little bit about the pagan dragon. And now it's telling us about the beast, because he's going to be there too. And it says, one of his heads was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? When it says, who is like unto the beast, that gives you the idea that there's not many other things like him, right? What word do we use for that? Unique, right? Did we put that on the board? We got a wounded head. Okay, under worldwide worship, it says there's no one else like him. So this is a very unique power, a political, religious power. It's unique, but not only that, it says, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So this is a very strong power. In other words, it's very difficult for anyone to fight against the beast. And what is the beast's specialty? It says right there twice in verse 4, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? Worship is his specialty. That's what he wants to deal with. That's what he wants people to do. He wants people to worship him. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. Well, that reminds us of those lion lips, right? That's the mouth speaking great things, like Babylon. It legislates worship. It commands. It uses the legal system to legislate, to enforce worship. So it says, and there was given unto him a mouth. That's those lion lips, speaking great things. Well, the speaking great things should remind us of what Daniel wrote, because you'll notice that this beast is talked about in Daniel also. We'll tell you in a moment who he is in Daniel, but in verse 25 of chapter 7 it says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. So that's just what it said here in chapter 13 of Revelation, right? It says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. And Daniel says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time, times, and the dividing of time. So this same beast here in chapter 13 is the one in Daniel 7:25 that speaks great words against the Most High. He wears out the saints of the Most High, and he thinks to change times and laws. And in Revelation 13 it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months is the same as a time, times, and half a time. It's 3.5 years, 42 months, 12 months in a year, or a day for a year means 1,260 years. The power we're speaking of here is clearly the same as, what is he called in Daniel? Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. The one that thinks to change times and laws? The little horn. So we have here in Revelation a recapitulation of the story that Daniel gives about what the little horn does. So this is clearly the little horn of Daniel is what we're talking about when we talk about the beast that's like a leopard. And it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. He thought to change times, prophetic times, and Sabbath times, the day of worship, because worship is his specialty, and to change laws. There's a part of the Ten Commandments of God's law that he didn't like. This beast didn't like especially one part of the Ten Commandments, so he took that out. That part that Moses talks about in Deuteronomy, when he especially emphasizes, when talking about the Ten Commandments, he especially emphasizes graven images. And so this beast speaks great things against God, and he blasphemes. And he blasphemes God. Let's see, here we have him, bad mouth, right? He's bad mouth. He makes laws that are bad. He tries to change times. And he's bad mouth because he blasphemes God. And it says he blasphemes God, and he blasphemes God's name, and he blasphemes God's tabernacle, and he blasphemes them that dwell in heaven. Those are those that worship in heaven. God's people dwell in heaven. The bride is seen in heaven because the bride is the corporate entity of God's people. And God's people dwell in heaven. Those that dwell on earth are those that aren't God's people. And so he blasphemes against God's people. And how can we think about that blasphemous attitude? He blasphemes God. So when he blasphemes God, you can blaspheme God because in John 10:33, Jesus was accused of blasphemy because he claimed to be God. So you can blaspheme God by claiming to be God, and that's what this power does, because he talked about also in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and there he's called the man of sin. Let no man deceive you, verse 3, by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Is that blasphemy? If he's not God, Jesus was God, but if he's not God, that's blasphemy. So that's blasphemy against God, and against God's name, that's God's character. Do you remember when they let that man down through the roof and Jesus said, "Son, thy sins be forgiven thee"? And the scribes and Pharisees said, "Oh, that's blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God only?" And they were right, weren't they? But Jesus was God, and he could forgive sins. And so this power claims to forgive sins, and that's blasphemy against God's character. And this power blasphemes against God's tabernacle, because he takes the sanctuary that's in heaven and he places it on earth, and he says, this is the temple of God. This is where true worship takes place. This is where sins are forgiven. He takes the ministry of Christ from heaven, the forgiveness of sins, and he places it in human beings on earth. That's blaspheming God's tabernacle. And he blasphemes, he persecutes God's people, so the dwellers in heaven. And in Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9, we had a text that said, they say they are Jews and are not. And remember, a Jew is represented in prophecy. That's a true believer. They say they're true believers, and they are not. And so this beast says, we are the true church, and they are not. That's blasphemy against God's people that dwell in heaven. So we've seen his activity. His head was wounded. He demands worldwide worship, and he badmouths God by legislating bad laws and by blaspheming God, his name, his tabernacle, and his people. And Daniel says the same thing when he says in chapter 7 and verse 24, the verse just before the one we read, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. Diverse from the first, that means unique. He shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. That's powerful. And that power, it says in chapter 8 of Daniel, speaking about the little horn again, beginning in verse 9, and out of one of them came a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. And he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, that's Jesus. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. That's the power that takes the sanctuary from heaven and places it on earth, takes the ministry of Christ to forgive sins and puts them into the hands of human beings. And it's the same power, that little horn, power of Daniel, is the one we're reading about here in chapter 13. And it was given unto him a mouth speaking great things, and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. So we've looked at his description. We've looked at his activity. And we should ask ourselves the question, who is he? Who is the beast like a leopard? We've seen his description, where he came from, what he looks like, who his progenitor is, his characteristics, a wounded head, worldwide worship, and bad mouth. And we can put here, you want to fill in the blank? It is the papal power, the papacy. No other power in earth's history fulfills all that we have seen about this beast. And now we turn to his future, and in verse 8 it says, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. We've seen that the wounded head is to be healed. That the head wounding came at the end of the 42 months, at the end of the 1260 years. In 1798, Napoleon, with the sword of the state, took captive the Pope. His head was wounded, but really the wounding of his head took place before that by the sword of the Spirit. The Protestant Reformation rose up with the truth of justification by faith alone. And with the sword of the Spirit, they wounded the head of the papacy, so that the papacy had to develop a counter-reformation because they were so afraid of what was happening to their views and their control over the earth. So the sword of the Spirit gave that wound, which was seen in its political result when Napoleon took the Pope captive in 1798. But it says, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. Well, that's talking about his future. This wound was healed, or is being healed, and will be healed completely. And when it is, it says all the world will worship him. So you have to see the difference between the world and those that dwell in heaven. Because those that dwell in heaven won't worship him. And how do you know if you're dwelling in heaven? If your name's written there. So I wanted a closing song, Is My Name Written There, on that page white and fair, in the book of his kingdom, is my name written there. But it's not in your hymnal anymore. Because it starts by saying, Lord, I care not for riches, neither silver nor gold. And Laodicea is very much interested in riches and silver and gold. But put in your mind the words of that song, is my name written there? Because that's going to be the difference between who worships the beast and who doesn't. It says, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. Do you see that word shall? What tense is that? That's future tense. That's not talking about history. That's talking about our day. And all that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. You know who wrote that book? Jesus is the author of that book. He's the author and finisher of our faith. And that book is the book of what? Of the life of the Lamb. That life was lived on this earth 2,000 years ago, and it was a perfect life. And that death was an atonement for the sins of the whole world. And that's what that book is saying. That book is saying, I have lived a perfect life, and I have died an atoning death for the sins of the whole world. Is your name written in that book? Jesus said to his disciples when they came back from a missionary trip, he says, don't rejoice that the devils are subject to you. You have a good life of sanctification. You are combating the devil. He says, rather rejoice. This is much more important than your life. Rejoice that your name is written in heaven. Is your name on that book that says, I've lived a perfect life and I have paid for all my sins? That's what it means to be written in the book of life. Do you trust that life and not yours as your hope of eternal life? If you do, you will not worship the beast. You will worship Jesus and God the Father. But all that dwell upon the earth shall worship the beast, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the earth. And if any man have an ear, let him hear. So this is now a special message from the Spirit to us. And it says, there is hope. Even when the beast comes back to power and persecutes God's people worldwide, there is hope, because he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He's taken many captive, but he'll come to his end, and none shall help him. That's what Daniel 11 says of this same power. He'll come to his end, and none shall help him. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. Here is for us who dwell in heaven, who trust in a righteousness that someone else lived, who trust in a death that someone else died. We have patience. That means we wait. We wait. But we wait knowing that the beast that looks like a leopard is going to come to his end. He's going to be taken captive. He's going to be eliminated. When we get to chapter 19, it says he and the false prophet that we're going to study about next time are cast into the lake of fire. So we have patience because we will wait knowing that God will bring an end to this power. But if we worship this power, we will be part of him and his entourage that are cast into the lake of fire. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Where's the faith of the saints? Not in their Christian life. The faith of the saints is in that perfect life that's now at the right hand of the Father. Is your name written there? Is that story your story? That's your hope, to not be part of the beast and his entourage.